And Mark. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Dungeon Pub. I am once again your humble bartender, and today we're gonna discuss the next topic in our Where to Start series. This is gonna be aimed at those of you who don't know anything about D&D, haven't tried it yet, or are looking into trying at it, but just can't find the right things around you. So again, go back to our previous videos on why would you do this and what are you gonna need in terms of a social link and some inspiration. We did a few videos on how to make a character. You can also take a look at those. But today, we're going to tie it all in with the essential tools that every person who's ever going to play D&D is going to need, meaning the books. Now, yes, dice, sure, yeah, it's a game, so you're going to need dice. But before you get to the dice, you're going to need some of the books. And depending on what you're aiming to do with Dungeons and Dragons, 90% of the people out there are going to just want to be, player characters, and that's perfectly fine. But depending on what you want to do, you're going to need either one or more of the official books out there. And with that in mind, we're going to start to discuss the most common one that you're going to find, and that's the Player's Handbook. Now, keep in mind, D&D is an old thing. D&D has been around for a very, very long time. Some of the first editions came out in, way back in 72. So a lot of people out there get confused. They look at all of that and they go, okay, so which one do I buy? And where do I get started? And, again, you're going to have people next to you, people who take you into the whole experience. Those people are going to tell you what you're going to need to buy. But just so that you don't get confused, don't get too contrived into all of that edition stuff, keep in mind that the latest edition is usually the one that people like to play. Now, there are some buffs out there who like to keep to the old stuff, and that's perfectly fine. I started off in edition 3.5, which was, again, the basic, the most amazing thing that's ever come out. And a lot of people are going to tell you that D&D never got better than that. But most of our games nowadays are in 5th edition because it's the most recent one. And 5th edition in specific is aimed at people who might not have all of that gaming background. They don't know so much about the gaming world. So D&D is aimed at that kind of people. Keep in mind also that D&D is not the only game out there that deals with this kind of topic. There's Pathfinder. There are other games that have the same aim. And in the Dungeon Pub, we're going to talk about those, especially Pathfinder on a different time in a different show. For today, we're going to take a look at 5th edition. And 5th edition came out roughly 2 years ago. It was 2014. And with the book itself came out what people refer to as the starter kit, right? Which contained some of the rules. Again, easy to start with, the most basic stuff. A set of dice, which was aimed at helping people start to get to know how the dice rolling works, and of course a basic adventure. And here's the thing: a lot of the stuff for D&D doesn't always come in the form of one book that says it all and has the chapters and that's it. That's everything you're gonna need. No, I mean, there's the basic things, and we're gonna discuss them in a second. But there also are additional content editions, like a separate adventure, like the Horde of the Dragon Queen, or just modules. Some of those came out very recently, and we're gonna discuss those in this very video. So, without further ado, the Player's Handbook. You're gonna notice that the Player's Handbook has pretty much everything about D&D in it, right? I mean, you're gonna look at the introduction, you're gonna look at the chapter descriptions, and you're gonna go, okay, this is okay. This is giving me some direction, and yeah, that's kind of the point behind the entire book, because you're supposed to look at this and go, okay, step by step characters. Like, how am I gonna make this character that I'm gonna use in the game? And this is everything that you're ever gonna need. Starting off with the book, you're gonna see how it gives you some of the basic ideas. It's literally taking you step by step in the creation process of two characters. And just looking at this, there's a lot of stuff in here that you're going to read and you're not going to remember. There's a lot of stuff in here that you're going to read and you're never going to need because you're just, in the foreseeable future, you're not going to play that character. But my advice to you is, when you get the book, just go over it and read everything. It's not that big, really. It's about 300 pages. And it's going to tell you everything you need to know about how to start off creating your character, how to play the game, how to approach adventures. It's going to tell you everything that you're ever going to need to know. Of course, these are just the basics, but, everybody has to start from somewhere. So these are the basics about the common and uncommon races, the classes in the game, how to create your background, how to approach that whole process. It's going to tell you all about equipment, and honestly, that's one of the best That's one of the best parts of the book, because a lot of the items that your DM is going to throw at you, especially the most of the common ones, are in there. And we're not just talking about swords and slings and warhammers. No, there's like lanterns and tables, chairs, like everything. You're gonna find it quantified in that book. And then you go to the customization options that you'll learn how to multi-class. You're gonna find all the feats in there. Using ability scores, again, chapter 7 is perhaps the most important part, because you're gonna see how your ability scores get to interact with the world, and how those modifiers that we talked about in the previous videos get to really characterize your character and really flush out your ideas. Advantage and disadvantage, one of the core concepts of 5th edition. You're gonna read about it there. Proficiency, ability checks, and using each ability. It's gonna show you how your character can be, a separate thing, something that you have put into the world. And again, it's very interesting how the book itself talks about very general ideas that even the DM applies to his own NPCs. You get to do the same thing, but behind this character sheet that you're going to create because of this book stands your mind, and it's going to show you exactly how your thoughts and your ideas can translate into this theater of the mind. Saving throws, very important for those of you who don't know. Saving throws are going to save your life, and then keep going. Adventuring, basic concepts like how time progresses in an adventure, how to move your character, how to interact with the environment, social interactions, one of my favorite parts of the game, resting, and what you can do between adventures, stuff like that. And honestly, the Player's Handbook is a good read, because it's written to appeal to everyone. It's not specifically meant for people who are, they want to just number crunch, or people who don't like all the mathematical stuff. No, it's all encompassing. It's meant to be open to everybody to read, everybody to get into it, and that's just a great thing. So chapter 9, combat, how to conduct yourself in combat, what's the order, how to get about all of this, how to use your abilities, how to move, how to use your actions. Very important. I'm just gonna say right now, people that have played this game for such a long time, like we have people who play for years now, they still don't understand all of the action mechanics, and even those that do sometimes forget about it. So again, the most basic thing in the book, you're gonna go over it over and over. You're gonna find newer things as you play the game, and then you're gonna come back to the basics and go, okay, so this derived from here. And then obviously you're gonna get to perhaps the second most important part of the book, the spells, like spell casting. How does it work? What are the spell lists? And the most important part of this chapter 3, the spell descriptions, because here you're gonna find all of the spells, all of the descriptions, all of the components of a spell. Is it vocal? Is it somatic? Is it both? Are you gonna need any components? This is just the meat and potatoes of everything, because D&D is a very magical game, and all of these RPG games are based on this magical model. So getting to know the spells, especially if you're gonna play some kind of a spellcaster, is essential, and you're gonna find them here. Now, I gotta say from experience, there are places in the web, right, where you can find better tools, right, tools that allow you to crop and literally look at spell schools and spell descriptions by other groupings. You can just look at level 1 necromancy spells. Yeah, but it's always good to have that book right next to you, or just have the spells copied, printed out. You can create your little spell book from there. So that's just some of the best stuff in the game. And then there's the appendixes in the very player handbook, Gods of the Multiverse. It's gonna explain all about the deities and how they interact with people, especially if you play a cleric or a paladin or a warlock. You can get a lot of ideas from here. Appendix C, the planes of existence, very important. Again, though, this is kind of basic stuff. If you want to go into this more, then there are other materials that you can look at, especially the Dungeon Master Guide, which is coming up next. And then creature statistics. Those are the most basic creatures you're ever gonna find in a game, like rats, bats, and all those basic things. And yeah, this is it. This is what you're gonna need to play D&D. This is all of it. You're gonna need this book, a character sheet, some dice, and a group of people that are gonna share your madness, essentially. Moving right along, in the next thing that you're gonna need, if you ever thought about DMing, is the DM guide, right? The 5th edition Dungeon Master Guide. And before we continue with the Dungeon Master Guide, just let me say, when I started DMing 5th edition, I didn't start off with the Dungeon Master Guide, because at the time actually, it wasn't out yet. So I referred to the player's handbook, and I created some of the first adventures that we ever played from the player's handbook. It's a great comprehensive tool. It shows you all the rules, shows you all the things that you're gonna need as a player, and some of the basic stuff for DMing as well. Moving on to the Dungeon Master Guide, though, the Dungeon Master Guide is a tool aimed at those who want to create worlds and adventures, and every single word written in this book is gonna help you out in terms of how to be an effective dungeon master. So, looking over the book specifics, it explains what your role is right at the beginning. Why would you have a dungeon master? Why is this guy on the table? And I mean, past the obvious stuff, of course, because of course you're gonna need somebody to do that. But how are you gonna achieve those things? And it starts you off with some very basic ideas, concepts, and pointers that later on are gonna be some of the greatest stuff that you ever read, because again, DMing gets more complex the more you do it. So chapter 1 of the whole book is literally a world of your own, how to get started building your world. And again, we're gonna make some videos based on these very basic topics, but for now, it literally tells you that you need to create a bigger picture and then form the biggest concepts of your world. So how are you gonna go about gods? How are you gonna map all these things? Which are gonna be the most major settlements, minor settlements, stuff like that. Languages, factions, magic in your world, creating a campaign, and how to start, orchestrating this whole thing. Campaign events. You can literally build a campaign by just looking at the tables there and rolling some dice, right? Because there's stuff over there like how to begin a campaign. Maybe a great cataclysm or a new leader or a new nation. Something's going on in the world, and then you can just, without even having ideas, you can take this book and create some very basic stuff. Now, if you have ideas and if you get inspired and if you derive your inspiration out of other things, again, we've spoken about this, movies, anime, where does your inspiration come from? Then this book is going to be your holy grail. It's going to be your mana, essentially, because it's going to channel all those ideas into already pre-built concepts, and then you can take those right off chapter 1. Like, you don't even have to go deeper, but you will, because DMs are curious beings, and you're gonna be thankful that this thing exists. So again, it even goes into flavors of fantasy, meaning that it explores the different kinds of a fantasy world that you can build, like a very dark, creepy, gritty, realistic fantasy world, or this lighthearted epic hero adventure quest that has a completely different sensibility, completely different goals and ideas. Chapter number 2 goes into creating a multiverse, and you're gonna say, hold on, time out, we've already been doing this. Well, yeah, but DMing is, again, can be really simplistic, or rather it is in the beginning, but then the more you do it, the more ideas you're gonna start to channel. So this chapter allows you to expand those ideas into the multiverse. It talks about the different planes of existence, the different worlds that you're gonna incorporate into the material plane that you're going to create. And it talks about planar travel in the astral and the ethereal planes, the Feywilds and the Shadowfell, those very, very basic, very obvious things that you're even going to see on the pictures. And then it talks about the inner and the outer planes, the elemental planes. It talks about creating a plane of your own. Even if you want to do that, you can have the plane of fluffy bunnies, because we've had that, actually. Surprisingly, we used to have 2 wild mages in our party, so kind of became important. You can have the plane of beer and promiscuous women, because again, that's a thing. You can have a barbarian in your party, and again, just knowing what ideas are out there, just knowing how you can surround your world with these interesting ideas, and then going into part 2 of the book, chapter number 3, creating adventures. Like, this is literally step by step how to go about creating an adventure from the start, how to entangle your players, how to run them through the most basic of events, how to get them to follow the lead, and it explores all the different ways that you can do this. So let's say that you have some kind of an inspiration, you think in your head, like, I wanna make this, I'm very interested in doing this. Then this is gonna channel your creativity, and kind of like the player's handbook, the Dungeon Master's Guide is meant for channeling your inner ideas, your concepts, and it's really, really good at that. It's read to be, it's meant to be very approachable. It's written in a way that it allows you to get immersed into the very book without even sitting at the table with other people. So how to how to structure your adventure, how to generalize your adventure and give it a type, right? How to derive complications and foresee certain things, how to create the very encounters that are going to define what your adventure is going to be all about. This is all chapter 3. Chapter 4, creating non-player characters. Essential, truly essential for what kind of a DM you're going to be, what kind of a campaign you're going to run, because the NPCs are the voice of your world, right? And creating good NPCs is the backbone of any serious DM. Chapter number 5, adventure environments, how to map dungeons, how to play the wilderness, how to map a wilderness, how to show your players the survival aspect of the game, how to run settlements, how to map a settlement, urban encounters, and stuff like that. Traps, again, everybody who's ever played a D&D game is going to tell you, traps are important. And this whole chapter is meant for the more concrete, the more specific things. It has things like how to run a business, right? And you can introduce these concepts into your game later on. After you've started off your campaign, maybe your players get some gold, and you kind of throw the idea out there, or you make an NPC who comes to them and says, "Hey, why don't you open a business?" And people, especially newer people, are going to be like, "What? Can we do that?" And you're going to be, "Yeah, because I totally came up with that." And there you go. That's what the DM guide is for. Chapter 6, between adventures. This is slightly less important, but you can have it in your game, especially later on when players start to get used to their characters, and the ideas that they have are already out there on the table, so they kind of need a little bit more, right? And this is where this can come into play. Literally training, gaining levels between adventures, and acquiring new skills and mastering certain things. This is where you're going to find certain tables and ideas how you can do that. Chapter number 7. Okay, here's where we get to the main reason why the DM is on the table. Treasure, right? Types of treasure, how to create magical items, which are, essentially the backbone of the entire equipment system. Like, how are you going to make those items? You can even make sentient ones, you can make artifacts, and you can even come up with rewards of your own. So this chapter 7, I really enjoy it. I've gone through it for about 14 times at this point, and every time I go through it, I have different ideas, and that's another aspect of the DMing guide, that it allows you to channel this creativity that you already have in your mind, and then it kind of molds it, lets you explore different concepts. So yeah, part number 3 of the DMing guide. This is chapter number 8, running the game, how to be an interactive DM, how to be effective at what you do, how to roll the dice, different ways of coming up with mechanics, like different initiative types, how to use ability scores, how to go about exploration, how to run a good social interaction, different ideas for combat, chase sequences, siege sequences, how to go about disease and poison, even rules for madness. Like, you can have a completely batshit crazy character in your game. We have such a character, but we're gonna go into that later. And of course, experience points, like different ways to calculate, different ways to go about the whole experience thing, because again, it's a core concept of the RPG world. It's a core concept of the Dungeons and Dragons D20 system, and there are different ways you can go about that. And then chapter 9, Dungeon Master's Workshop. Now this is where it gets even more interesting, and again, this is one of the most important parts of the book, because this allows you, literally, it shows you how to create house rules, right? And house rules are certain things that every DM has, right? Every DM likes certain things and doesn't like other things. He wants to have them out of the game or into the game. And house rules are great, right? Respect your DM's house rules, but then house rules sometimes turn into something else, like homebrew, right? And you're gonna come about this word a lot in the world of role-playing games and pen and paper games, because this literally means that somebody sat down and created, out of his own mind, a rule or an item or an entire class, or kind of like what I like to do, modify races, create entirely new races, create items that are not in the game, like firearms. So stuff like that, you're gonna find rules and ideas on how to do it here, like creating a monster, create a spell, create a magic item, creating new character options. Those are all essential for a long-running Dungeon Master game. And then we get to the appendixes. It literally allows you to create a random dungeon. Like, you can come to this appendix if you ever stumped for an idea, or you haven't come up with anything, or you're just like, you step into the portal and something happens, and then you start rolling the dice. And this is great because it allows you to start from the starting area. It allows you to create passages. You can literally roll the dice and go, okay, so here's a passage, here's a room, doors, chambers, stairs, connecting, stocking a dungeon with monsters and stuff like that. So you can literally make an entire dungeon out of thin air right off this single appendix. Appendix B is the monster list. These are additional monsters that are different from the ones in the player's handbook, which you can use right off the bat in your adventures. And then maps, right? You can look at some of the well-made maps that come straight from Wizards of the Coast. They're very well detailed, they're colored, and you can just have so many ideas. You can look at one of those and go, okay, I like this, but I want to make it, better, different. So you can go to Photoshop if you have that skill, or go to some basic editing software, or just do it by hand. Hey, if you're good at that, go do it. Power to you. You can make a map, see how it's done, see how the grid works, and that's going to make your adventures even more customized and even more awesome. Appendix D, Dungeon Master Inspiration. Hey, right, this is the thing. This is where it all starts, and this is the reason why we're making a specific video or specific series about how to get inspiration, because inspiration is key to being a dungeon master. Like, you cannot, or I'd say should not, but again, some people tend to do it, other people think that's how it's supposed to be, but you cannot make a great adventure without having this sensation in your heart, this thing that's coming right out of you. And it shows. Like, people show your enthusiasm, they look at your enthusiasm, they go, oh god, like, this guy, he's really putting so much effort into it. And that's about it. Being key is it's all about inspiration in D&D. So that's the Dungeon Master Guide, and there's the third book, which I'm gonna go over very briefly, because this is the encyclopedia of monsters. This is the monster manual, and irrelevant of whether you want to DM or play, it's good to have this book, because it reveals a lot about the Dungeons and Dragons world. It's good to have this book in any RPG that you're ever gonna play. Like, Pathfinder has a great monster manual as well. So getting this book is not gonna be essential, right? It's not gonna be part of the basics, but it will show you a lot of how D&D is made. If you want to DM, I'd say it's essential, because it's going to allow you to see a lot of the things that go behind the scenes, and it's going to allow you to create your own stuff right after you go over it. And of course, the intention behind the book is to have this compendium, this already created book with full of monsters, full of created stuff that you can either take straight out of the book, or slightly modify, or just take the mold for and create something of your own. So the book goes off over some basic stuff like terrain and where you can find certain monsters, and then it just blows up with all these creatures pre-built. I'm not gonna go over any of them. If you're interested in the monster manual, go out there, find it, get it, look it over. But again, you're gonna find all your standard variety of demons, devils, dragons, and dryads, and everything that begins with D, obviously, starting off with the D section, angels and cyclopses and giants and all those things that you would expect to find in an RPG. And of course, some things that you would think to yourself, why would you put this here? But it works. It really works. Zombies, again, everything off the top. Just garden variety monsters, counter variety things. So that's the Dungeon Master's Guide. That's the monster manual. Very important if you want to DM. Not so important if you just want to be a player, but hey, the books are there if you want to go and get them. Now, sometime after the 3 books got out, Wizards of the Coast released an appendix, right? And this was a separate book. It had a variety of things in it, and this is what we call a module, right? There's a lot of them out there for all the different editions, but this one was specifically aimed at 5th edition. It came out right after the Dungeon Master Guide and the Monster Manual, like a few months later, and it added a few things to the game. Number one, it added new races like the Aarakocra, the Deep Gnome. Hey, I can't say the name because we never had one in the party, so I never had to learn it. Deep Gnomes, Genazi or Genazi, relevant, and the Goliaths. Right, so those are 4 new races that came straight off the book. You can up and make a player character with one. And that's just additional stuff, right? And this is great for the RPG setting in general. Like it's great for the game because you can just have stuff added into the game. Where it starts to get a little bit tedious is when you have one player who is coming out, who has a character from one of the appendixes, and other people are just playing the standard player's handbook characters, and you just kind of have to switch, go through the books. But again, with time and with some preparation, it's actually not that bad. And then it added different spells, like new spells, elemental spells. Like the whole thing is called the player's companion, but it had a very elemental twist to it, right? It was based off of the elemental evil setting, and it added a lot of elemental spells, a lot of new spell descriptions, some new mechanics even, and that was just great. And that's what we call a module. And there have been other modules since its release, like the Princess of the Apocalypse, the Horde of the Dragon Queen. They all tend to add a few things, like a new creature, some new items, maybe a new race, right? And then some of them contain entire adventures, others have different information. Think of them as, paper DLC, literally. And then we have other things like the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide. Now, keep in mind, everything else after the player's handbook, if you want to be a player, is not essential, right? If you want to look into those things, but you don't want to get the books, or just don't know what you're doing, then ask your DM. Hey, ask some of the people on the table. They're gonna tell you all about it. Maybe your DM is just gonna sit down and make a brief, description, write it down. And he's gonna give it to you. That's all you're gonna need. But if you want to go into that whole world, then go get the books, and you're gonna find a lot of amazing stuff in there, like, again, the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide. Now, this is the most recent thing that came out, I believe, or it was that or Princess of the Apocalypse. But this thing is just unbelievably good, because it takes the core concepts of the game and just adds on top of them. Now, it doesn't change any of the mechanics, right? The mechanics stay the same. It answers a lot of the questions, and then it just adds more fluff, more races, more classes, more class options, actually, different ways to look at the backgrounds. It shows you all about the Sword Coast, right? It reveals this entire area to you. If you haven't, had any experience with it, never played Neverwinter, never played Baldur's Gate, never played Icewind Dale, this is gonna tell you all about it. It's kind of done in a little cool story. It reveals the world, right? The world of Turiel and its lands, time in the realms, and a very brief history of what's been going on. It tells you all about magic and religion and the gods of Faerun, stuff like that. And then it goes on into slightly different things, like gives you better explanations, or rather further explanations of the races and all of the different aspects of them. Gives you different character creation options, and that's just great. It's great because it came at a time where the book had already been out, so a lot of people had played, and then a lot of homebrew was created at that time. So this is Wizards of the Coast's way to just add on top of the pile and tell you, hey, here are so many options, just go with whatever you feel. So some of the core races, like Tiefling, Half-Orc, Half-Elves, stuff like that, Gnomes, Dragonborn, Humans, more information, just more fluff, more things that you can put into your character sheet and go, hey, this makes me special. Chapter 4 goes over classes and different class options and variety, and this is just unbelievably good. Like different schools for the Bard, different domains for the Cleric, just martial archetype for the Fighter, just a straight up new one, because we already had 3. Why don't we have another one? Different stuff for the Monk. Like all the classes get these additional things that you can, just go and use. And then backgrounds, like additional backgrounds based off of the ones that we already have, but kind of tweaked, kind of changed, kind of better fit, your concept. Keep in mind, this book reveals something very interesting, that if you have the desire and the inspiration, you can do this for yourself. You can sit down and write these things. You can look at the formula that Wizards of the Coast are using to create this, and you can literally create stuff of your own. So with this in mind, these are all the books that are out for 5th edition right now, I believe. And that's it. That's everything. Keep in mind, again, I'm going to say it one last time. If you're just looking at playing the game, if you found a bunch of people that you want to spend some time with, play the game, just get the player's handbook. That's all you're ever going to need. Later on, when you make a character and when you start playing the game, then maybe you can look into some other stuff, like the the player companion and the Princess of the Apocalypse and the Sword Coast Adventuring Guide. But before that, before you ever stepped foot into the world, all you're gonna need are, again, the book, a pencil, sharpener, the character sheet, some dice, and a DM who's willing to sit down and tell you how your imagination is gonna play out. So that's it. I've been your humble dungeon master, or rather bartender. Maybe soon even your dungeon master. I look forward to reading all your messages, all your tweets, and next video is probably gonna be about some class or something. So thank you for listening, and go play some D&D. Come on.